This building was 6 years old when the telephone was invented in 1876, 9 years old when Thomas Edison invented the predecessor of today's light bulb, and 15 years old when the automobile was invented in 1885. Williamson County was only founded in 1848, peeled off from Milam County at that point. It was said that Anthony and Amanda Smith were the first settlers west of Georgetown, and they had come from Fayette County in 1848. So you can see they both were only 20 apparently when they came. Yeah, if you notice, this tin here was penciled in with a magic marker or something sometime later on. This wasn't penciled in until the 80s or 90s sometime, because we used to sit here in church and wonder, when did Amanda die? Surely somebody knows.
The window was created before she died?
So pretty obviously the window must have been created before she died. The front windows here, in fact, the whole collection of the church is museum quality. And the window out there in the narthex is actually called the Founder's Window. The Bryson couple and their daughter Huldah were charter members. And what we know about the Brysons is that they came from South Carolina in 1852, and they settled, it's across from the cemetery now. And the picture of their original home is hung out in the narthex. They were followed by a family named the Pools in 1854, and they came from South Carolina because they'd been friends of the Brysons in South Carolina, so they followed them here a couple of years later. But their trip took them several weeks, and in that particular caravan there were 48 settlers and 52 slaves. And at any rate, this was not where the church originally started. It was a log cabin, one room across from the Brysons' house, and there apparently was a circuit rider who came and established the church with these 5 charter members, and then they met in the log cabin and in homes, so we're told. But then Dr. Bryson tells in his Shin Oak Ridge book about the Smiths and the Brysons. The 2 men went down to one of the very earliest Methodist churches in this part of Texas. It's called Haney's Chapel. Haney, who was the minister there, referred them to a man named Landrum, who was studying in Atlanta at the time, and he came all the way from Atlanta to be in Liberty Hill, and so he was both the school teacher and the minister. Then we had single pastors up until sometime in the 50s, early 60s, when the communities were really struggling. So we started sharing a minister with Bertram because they were in a similar spot. And so at the point when we came, they would do a 9 o'clock service over there and then rush over here and do an 11 o'clock service, and we had our Sunday school at the 10 o'clock hour, I guess. We came to Liberty Hill in 1970. I walked in the back door there the first morning at the Sunday school hour, and the Sunday school class was 12 or 15 little old ladies about our age. And one of them turned to me and handed me the book and said, "You're our teacher. We're too old to do this anymore." And so thus began our adventure with this church. When Louise and I came, we were by far the youngest couple in the church. She had already turned 29. I had not at that point. And thanks for that, she says. She's got a few months on me. I'll never let her forget it. Any rate, And since that point, we've become, in a course of 50 and a fraction years, we're now the longest tenured members in the church. We're in our 51st year here, and it's a very special place. Louise's family both came from Liberty Hill to begin with, and so though they had left years before, when we moved back to live on the place where her mother grew up, this was the church home. But this church nearly died because of the boll weevil and because of the Great Depression. They literally lost a whole generation. And it was true not only here, but across a good part of Central and East Texas, because it depended on the cotton. That's when Louise's parents went to West Texas because of that. And
they have migrated to the
they migrated out there because that country was just opening up in the 20s. You know, they talk about Liberty Hill having had 2 banks and 3 cotton gins and whatever in the 20s and so forth, and it just evaporated.
And the college.
And the college, of course, it burned in '02 or whenever. Half a dozen of these little ladies that I taught were graduates of that college. They were the last class, and it was just really neat. And 2 of those folk, Georgia Williams and Willie D. Spivey, did something that nobody else will ever do, and that is they lived in all 3 centuries that the church was in existence. They were both born before 1900 and both lived beyond 100. It's quite different from what it was, and I guess you have to stop and think a little bit about the history again. In 1870, the building was multi-purpose. 3 stories, the Masonic Lodge met in the upper level. The church and Sunday school on Sunday, and the public school during the weekdays met on the 2nd level. And the lower level, we understand, as it's written in one of the church histories, was open, and the town pigs were under the church building. So that was the way it was initially. In the early 1900s, I think 06 or something like that, they took the top 1.5 stories off. The choir area put in, I think, at the same time maybe that the upper stories were knocked off. I look at it from outside. The main building is cut stone, square or rectangular blocks. The wings are built from fieldstone that was brought in by the parishioners from off of their respective farms. It was the original church in Liberty Hill, started in 1854, as we said. So it just makes you stop and think a little bit about it. And we feel privileged to have ourselves worshiped on this site for about 1/3 of the time that this building has been here. We had a sesquintessentialist, I can't even say it anymore, but it was dispersing the finest distillation of sesquibration spirits. That was what we intended to do. And I have to tell you one little story out of this. This is called the ox in the ditch, and it is, and you'll find the definition there. This is a sesquinecdote. Ms. Mary Anderson was a Liberty Hill native and lifelong faithful church member. She was part of the adult Sunday school class, mostly elderly women. When your sesquieditor became its teacher in the early 1970s, and an occasional discussion topic had to do with what it was appropriate to do on Sunday. This always generated some lively discussion, given the commandment to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy, juxtaposed with Jesus, of course, repeatedly exposing the hypocrisy of the Pharisees when they condemned him for healing on the Sabbath. More than once, Mary chimed in with the following: "My daddy used to say that if the ox was in the ditch on Sunday, he thought it was all right to get him out, but he didn't think it was quite right to go out on Saturday night and push him in." This usually signaled a new topic, as there wasn't much to say after that.